preparation that went into this documentary, and a lot of hours and a lot of late nights putting together different information or dealing with certain difficulties we faced along the way. But I don't think it really hit me that we were doing anything until I got into the van for 25 hours. And I think that's when it really hit me that we were like actually going to do something, and it wasn't just what we were doing on paper anymore.
Well, the whole idea for the project got started before the semester, actually. We had a faculty meeting, and one of our administrators asked us to apply for a university grant for something creative. And so I said immediately, okay, I'd like to do something with my immigration and culture class. Everybody was very excited about doing some sort of a research, extended research coming out of the class. So I kicked it around a little bit and thought about it. And first I wanted to just come down and do a research project along the border, do more in-depth research. And then I talked to the class about it a bit more, and they, as a group, a certain group of the class, about a third of the class, decided they wanted to do a documentary film about the topics in the class, the immigration issues.
So throughout all of the making of the project, it seemed like a very cool idea, and then once we actually started planning it, it seemed to get very real.
Sort of just took on a life of its own. Joe had started to talk to a few people, a couple of his old friends, Liz Rogers, she's a federal defender down there. She hooked him up with a bunch of different people. Everybody just started hooking everybody up, and although we weren't recognized completely up here by the administrators at first, people down there took us pretty serious from the get-go, and I think that allowed for us to take ourselves a bit more seriously.
Well, I think this definitely shows what Watauga should be, because it is experiential learning at its finest, and versus just staying in the dorms and doing crafts work in school and into class. We're actually going and getting out of the classroom and doing things.
Being able to go down there and see things firsthand was extremely eye-opening and gave us more of a well-rounded perspective versus just the things that we were reading in books and online.
When we were actually there, it was really interesting being with a group of 6 very strong-minded, passionate people, trying to figure out the smallest things, like which interview we were going to go to next, what time we were going to organize things. Definitely all needs to be debated thoroughly with all of us because we were just everybody had exactly what they wanted to do in their head, and sometimes that conflicted, but it was really awesome when we all got together and we really figured out something great that we could do.
Not just students, I think everyone is a little put off when you stand up and decide you're going to be the expert and you're going to tell everybody the way it is. When the more effective, and we know this has been studied over and over, and we know honestly that students need to be involved in their own learning experience. And the only way to do that is to take them out of the classroom and let them have experiences. We call that experiential learning, where they're experiencing whatever it is they're trying to learn about, and they're sharing that with you as a teacher, instead of you standing in front of a classroom saying, go read books and articles and it'll be fine, you'll know enough, because they don't. They have to come out in the world and share with you what you may have experienced before, realizing that learning is always an experience.
Being down there was pretty awesome. We got to meet a variety of different people, and we also did get some different viewpoints on the same thing. We talked to Border Patrol, we talked to federal defenders for 30 years, so it was very opposing viewpoints, but it was very cool, very interesting just to see firsthand what it is. We hear a lot of rhetoric on the news and whatnot from different politicians, but at the end of the day, the people that deal with this at the front are the people down there. It was very cool getting their opinion, their advice, their views on this, and just their professional opinions too. It was very cool, and I think it's something that everybody, not just us, but the public should be aware of.
I had to do a couple interviews. I split that job with Claire, and I'm a pretty shy person, and having to talk to people and interview them was a little bit nerve-wracking sometimes, and there was probably a lot of sweat involved, especially with all the hot lights. Even though I wasn't actually on camera, that was a little bit nerve-wracking, but I think we've all kind of grown into our own, and we've gained a little bit of confidence in being researchers and being investigators and taking charge. And the project's shown us that we can accomplish things, and it doesn't matter where we start from, but we can reach our goals, we can get to the end.
It's definitely been extremely eye-opening. Being able to talk to people who have firsthand been able to, they have the confidence to speak out about the abuse that they've been through, about the corrupt system that we live in, and the things that aren't talked about.
Being down there was very impactful, and I guess the best showcase of that was when we met Jose. I don't remember his last name, Jose Rodriguez. He was a asylum winner. He won his asylum case through Carlos Spector, another lawyer that we had interviewed, and his entire part of his family had been shot up and killed by the cartel, and he had come to the US and been stuck in an ICE facility, had been mistreated in the ICE facility, had been put in prison, mistreated in prison. His case had been prolonged, and after years and years of fighting through the courts, had finally won his asylum case. And it was very impactful to see him. It's almost unbelievable that you're talking with somebody that has dealt with family members being shot up in front of them and sitting in it. He talked about one story at one point after his son had died in a restaurant. He was sitting in his house with his AK, with his gun in his hand, and he's like, "They're gonna come for me, they're gonna come for me." And it was just very impactful and it's very changing to be hearing that firsthand from this person that has experienced something like this. And it's almost unbelievable in a sense that just across our border people can be dealing with this, and we can be we can lack apathy so much as to not care about that.
This is a sincere effort to reach out and try to have my students and me and everyone, by showing this documentary, understand the reality of the border here. This is not some cliche thing that you can throw around in political discussions. This is a reality, and it affects people's lives on both sides of the border. And we need to learn that. And this has been an attempt to experience that.
It's really remarkable how much a professor can influence experiential learning, because I don't think that every professor has it in them like Joe did to plan such an extraordinary trip with his students, trying to get as many people on board as possible. He drove us the 24 hours to El Paso. He made sure that we got everywhere we needed to get to all the interviews. He figured out all our connections. Maybe those are the kind of people we should be finding in programs like this, to be leaders of experiential learning, people who are really willing to get their students out and learning and interacting with their education.
3, 2.
I'm very excited for the documentary. I was very surprised in the amount of information and quality of the interviews and everything else that we've done. And I can't wait to see the footage and how it actually turns out. And I want copies, and I want to just hand out copies.
A very good experience that all of us were able to have, and that we were fortunate enough to have.
Everybody I've talked to that is up to date on this, they're really wanting more info. They're really wanting to know how this happened, what took place. Everybody's sort of really excited. They're kind of awestruck on how 7 or 8 first semester freshmen and 1 professor could pull off this entire project with the low budget that we did.
Doing the research yourself and talking to people yourself makes it real and makes it different. And instead of reading those books and watching those documentaries, you can write those books and you can make those documentaries. And that's what I hope for future learners, is that they'll realize that they don't have to take everybody else's word and they can make their own instead.